Hi, this is Josh Kalscheur, Practice Director over our advisory services here at Nordic. We're here today to talk a little bit about our advisory services and specifically wanted to spend some time with Sheri Long, one of our advisory services consultants out in the field. Wanted to spend some time just chatting a little bit about kind of your background and what brought you to where you are in the industry today, because I think that's great information for folks who are interested in potentially becoming a Nordic consultant, and also for our partners who are out there looking for your level of skill and expertise. So
Sure.
I wonder if you could share a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so I'd love to say I planned it, but I kind of fell backwards into clinical informatics. I'm a nurse, and I started off in trauma, and we moved to an area that didn't really have a lot of that. So I tried all of the departments, and ended up in clinical informatics by default. But what I realized was that all of that experience really helped with what I'm doing. So I'm staying with clinical informatics, and I love it. And I've been doing it for about 23 years.
Awesome. And I'd be interested to know from your perspective specifically, Sheri, clinical informatics is a term that I hear quite a bit as I'm talking to both our clients as well as consultants and candidates who are interested in working with us. And I feel like there's a real wide definition for what that is, across regions and certainly across individuals. And so in your experience, how would you kind of categorize clinical informatics? And we can talk a little bit more about kind of how you express that in the work that you do.
Yeah. Well, clinical informatics is, like you said, is a wide topic, and it's about really understanding clinical processes, throughput, and the hospital and ambulatory setting, but using the IT aspect of it and having a knowledge of the integration of the system and how to use that within those workflows. However, on the spectrum of that, there are some that have a certification and they have a clinical informatics title, but you really want to make sure that there's an experience level that goes along with that, to where you really have lived those workflows, or you've really understood them from a build perspective. Mm-hmm. So a lot of, when I personally have talked to clinical informatics, the first thing I want to know is, what have you done, and how did you get to where you are? Mm-hmm. It really helps kind of define how much they really do know.
And I would say that is one thing that I really value in my conversations with you, and certainly very much look for in regards to folks who operate at your level, which is that combination of true to life expertise in the field, doing the work, and then also that combination of a background in IT and having been through a number of different Epic implementations and projects to be able to kind of bring that to bear. Can you talk a little bit about the breadth of your experience in Epic? So, just a quick overview of the different types of projects that you've done in the Epic space.
So I'm currently working on, in 30 days, I'll have my 21st Epic Big Bang install, which is basically everything revenue and clinical going up together. Now, along the way, we've had a lot of projects with some of those Big Bang installations that they want to add an entire hospital to their system. They want to add a whole oncology clinic. Mm-hmm. And so it's like a mini build. It's not really called, sometimes they call them optimizations because they're optimizing Epic at their site. Other times they call them, just additional purchases that are additional installations. But I've probably done in different variations. Some are revenue first and then clinical on top, and vice versa. Probably an additional 24 of those, as well as optimizing workflows when Epic brings new code or has new products that you want to integrate. That's another type of a project that takes the same kind of perspective as the bigger ones. So I should start counting those too, but I haven't done it.
Keep a tally on
your
wall.
I need to, of my minis.
One thing I really appreciate in my communication with you is really the level of excellence that you not only expect of yourself clearly, but of the folks that you work with as well. And one thing that I always find very interesting is how you refer to kind of the teams that you work with. And that when you are working with analysts, for example, you are expecting individuals who can analyze, right? Who can provide expertise in regards to their experience, how it integrates with the system and workflow and users, and not just an understanding of how to kind of fix a widget in the Epic system.
True.
And I really appreciate that perspective. I wonder if you can share a little bit about kind of how you feel like that benefits a team and benefits an organization to have that perspective, because it's certainly one that we share at Nordic.
Yeah, and a lot of the analogies that I make are about healthcare. So for me, it's like a code. When you run a code on a patient, every person that comes to the code is expert in their area. They stay in their lane, they contribute equally, and they expect and assume everyone else is doing the same thing, and collaboratively, it's extremely successful. That's a model that works for saving lives. So in an Epic implementation, I kind of think of it the same way. Epic is absolutely expert on their product, and they come there with a certain amount of knowledge base beyond themselves. And then you need operations, you need the site to be able to really understand their demographics, their culture, the goals that they have, the way that they want to impact the healthcare in their community. And then you need people on the project that understand both languages and that understand how I can take some of the brilliant input that Epic gives us and explain it to a healthcare provider whose focus is somewhere else. But we still need them to be fully engaged. So it's almost like an interpreter. So that role is very clear. And so for me, I kind of see it like that. It's one of the things where the analysts need to understand that dynamic, and they have to fill a role as being able to listen and hear things when people don't really realize they're saying it, to generate an integrated workflow that works for patients.
And a word that I hear you use often, Sheri, and that I feel like, as I understand, certainly the work that you do and your background really kind of frames how you approach a project is from that workflow perspective. And I appreciate that a lot. I feel like when I hear you refer to workflow, you're not talking about a document of how a person does a thing. You're talking about the experience of how a user interacts both with patients as well as with the system. And I wonder if you could could you dive into that a little bit more, kind of where that comes from and how you see that benefit the projects you work on?
Well, so it's really easy when you have so many pieces of a project to get focused on all the pieces, the different areas, And what it really boils down to is hospitals sell the bedside care, the gurney side care, the chair side care, the whatever. And so you really have to keep your eye on that, and everything else will fall into place. So I really believe that when you look at things from a team approach, and you understand that everyone has the same goal, but they have a different way of reaching it, that you're able to come up with a site-specific way of going from how do we get this thing moving along, the installation plan that Epic provides us, and we end up with something that a doctor or a nurse or the lab or anyone else that supports patient care can say, this makes sense when I'm right here and I'm taking care of you. So for me, it does have a very specific clinical piece, and I think everyone should keep that in mind. Even if you're in the revenue cycle side, you're charging for that care.
For sure, and I can just hear that kind of passion in your voice as
it's the nurse
as you're talking about it. But I feel like that resonates, I'm sure, with providers and clinicians and nurses that you are working with on these projects, and so I can certainly sense that.
Yeah, they feel very, very important. They everything kind of starts with them and moves out. And I think that it's a type of an attitude, especially when you're dealing with the providers who generate revenue and who help all the rest of the system, do what they need to do. When everybody feels good that they're accounted for in this process, it shows, and they're involved, and they're excited, and they want to contribute, and the patients feel it. And for me, that's what I look at. That's I know that people have all kinds of different ways to monitor, KPIs and everything else. I'm looking at the patient and seeing how they're happy on Go Live Day. So,
for sure.
Yeah.
I would be interested to know, Sheri, knowing the breadth of your experience and the number of projects that you've been on, could you share maybe like what you feel like has been one of your greatest accomplishments on one of these Epic projects, or when has been one of those moments where you've really felt like you've just kind of hit it and it's working really well?
Yeah, it was kind of it started off as being one of my most frustrating moments. And we had a physician who was a cardiac surgeon, and he was, had a very big practice, and he had a lot of very high profile patients. And in the middle of Go Live, third day, he just had a fit. And they called me to come talk to him. And I thought, oh no.
Physician whisperer?
Yeah, and so I was trying to figure out how to make this person happy. And a couple of things I tried really didn't work that well, and I thought this is not going to be okay. And he was really talking about the entire experience. And then I just sat down and said, well, just show me. And he took the time after he calmed down a little bit, and we worked through something that was so small, and it had nothing to do with the system. It was about how he felt about utilizing the system. And when we finally worked through that one little part and come up with a tiny solution, he was so thankful. His whole attitude changed. And the best part about it was, and the reason I thought it was a success, is a lot of people were afraid of him, including myself. And now he's a really good friend. So I think that was a success. And he ended up being very positive and a leader in that particular group. So I was happy for the turnaround.
For sure. Yeah, it's amazing how those small moments can sometimes have the largest impact.
Yeah. And it's always something unique. In every go live, there's something like that happens, a human moment in the midst of all this technology that really makes it real. And I like those times. So.
And I can certainly sense from you, and obviously in the number of conversations that we've had, that you're a very relational person. Those relationships matter a lot. And that very much is how we define ourselves here at Nordic, very much a relationship-based organization. And so I'd be interested to know from you, Sheri, what you see in Nordic. What has been your experience with Nordic, and what you see in us that either reflects who you are or that you feel kind of creates that collaborative relationship.
Well, I've been involved with a lot of different consulting companies and different companies that provide all kinds of services around this particular type of industry. And, they all come in, they get what they need, and they leave. My first experience with Nordic was I met a person that was a leader in the company, and I incidentally at a UGM, so personable and really wasn't on the sell, and he was like interested in just people in general. So it made you want to talk. That led me to inquire about hiring a resource when I was at a particular place. I was the director for orders and lab, and I hired that resource. And the interesting thing is that every experience I had, from meeting one of the leaders to actually employing one of the consultants, they all act the same way. And it's like, we're glad to be here. What's going on? Oh, well, yeah, we'll work with Epic, but how are you doing? And I thought that was really odd. At first, I thought it kind of threw me off a little bit. But then when I had the opportunity to come to work for Nordic, unfortunately, right as I was placed at the site, my younger sister passed away about 2 weeks later. And I was brand new to this company, and everybody jumped in to say, what can we do to help you? Nobody was upset that I was at a new client. They didn't care what Nordic looked like. It was just going back to what we said earlier, it was the part that absolutely matters. And that's why I think it's probably the best place I've ever worked. So.
I really appreciate hearing that.
You remember that, don't you?
I remember very much. I'm kind of missing it a little bit as we talked about it, but I do. And I think that is very much core to us at Nordic. We care about you as our consultants deeply. We care about our clients very deeply, and it's that long-term relationship and approach that is that kind of sets the stage for everything else to be successful, and we very much feel that way.
Well, I asked some of the folks out there. I said, "Are y'all just doing this for me today?" Because everybody was so nice, and I thought, I'm going to have to mind my manners. They're all really nice around here, but I don't know. I guess everyone does it, so.
For sure.
Yeah, I think you're paying them, but I'm not sure.
Well, this has been a wonderful chat, Sheri. I really appreciate your time and definitely appreciate getting the opportunity to learn a bit more about you, and certainly hope that we've been able to share some information and some tidbits that have been helpful for others as well. So.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.